Hey everyone, welcome to another rapid fire review, this time for A44's Flintlock. Now Flintlock is a third-person, hardcore-ish, action-adventure RPG thing set in a vaguely Napoleonic-era fantasy setting, hence the name Flintlock. An army of the dead, as well as some nasty Mesopotamian gods, have invaded our world or their world, and it's up to us and our team of sappers to blow them all back to hell, or whatever they call where they came from. Now, A44's team described what they were going for as somewhere in the middle of God of War and Elden Ring. Combat coming from the Souls-like games, while the storytelling had more of a cinematic presentation, similar to God of War. Now, we're going to start with the latter of the two parts and get to the story and presentation. Now, this story feels familiar. It's a smashing together of the realm of the gods and the realm of mortals, and the problems that naturally arise afterwards. And then the journey of a hero to put a stop to it. It's something that I'm sure I've read somewhere in the 99-cent used fantasy books that litter my bookshelves. And that's not a bad thing. I enjoy those stories as simple as they may be, and I enjoy this one. But it's probably not going to win a Nebula Award or anything, but it is a solid enough base that kept me interested. The characters in Flintlock are a variation on the standard pairing of main character with a smaller sidekick that's granting them powers or just doing different things. Now that standard pairing doesn't always work out. For every Kratos and Atreus, there seems to be 5, Frey and Cuffs, which if you don't know who that is, you are lucky, as they are the abysmal main characters of Forspoken, a game whose only purpose now is to serve as a bad example.
Destruction and corruption are beautiful forms of creation in themselves.
I don't sound like that.
You absolutely sound like that.
No, you absolutely sound like that. Yeah, see? Two can play at that game.
You're fucking stupid.
Fortunately for me, A44 was far more successful than Luminous, and Nor and her little feathery fox friend are far more likable. The dialogue seems natural enough. I bought their initial animosity and distrust of one another, as well as the characters growing closer as the adventures went on. The chit-chat between them was welcome and mostly organic, though towards the end of the game it did tend to repeat a little bit. For the gameplay, this is a third-person action RPG. Souls-light, or whatever you want to call it. You have potions that refill as you rest, reputation to gather from defeated enemies to use to upgrade your character, big, nasty skill-testing bosses, and save points to fast travel to. Flintlock does have a few variations that I appreciated, one being that the reputation you collect has a press your luck mechanic that as you gather the points, the longer you go without getting hit, increases what you collect. Now you can collect at any time, but if you get hit, you only get the base value. Like the story, the combat felt familiar too. It's surprisingly fluid, and actually has a great pace to it. The two-weapon system works very well, and allows for all sorts of offensive combos. The axe regenerates pistol shots as you attack, which is a really neat way to incentivize the player be on the offensive. You as the player have a huge kit of defensive tools at your disposal. Blocking works pretty well, but honestly I didn't feel the need. The dodge gets you in or out of the fray in a satisfying manner. Jumping works just as well offensively as defensively to avoid attacks. And the gun and axe parrying is very satisfying. Parrying an enemy to open them up for a 2-3 hit combo to generate a powder charge, and then using that charge to set up a gun parry later, and just locking them into a corner to do that over and over again is the best. If you want a game where once you learn the timings, you feel like you can victimize the bosses, this is it. For enemy types, you get a variety of undead and human enemies. Most just require a few attacks to dispatch, but others, especially towards the end, require a bit of finesse, or at least a lot of brute force. I would say that most of the bosses and mini-bosses felt good to fight, but I think they missed the mark with some. The end boss's design also feels a bit out of left field. You spend the entire game honing your dodge and parry skills, and at the end, the arena kind of turns into pixel barf with attacks that start completely off screen and at bad angles. The boss has leaps attacks that screw up the camera and teleport attacks that untarget the boss, and you have no idea where it's at. I think this trend of big, stupid finale set-piece bosses where you can't actually see what's happening just needs to go away. Give me a one-on-one, high-stakes duel that lets me actually use the skills I've learned while playing your game. You know, like Liza P did. And while I'm giving my boomer takes on gaming trends that I hate, this game also requires inputs to be held down for a few seconds instead of simply being pressed once, even in menus. And me having to hold down a button for 2 seconds to get on a ladder is stupid. And developers really just need to cut that shit out. Now, while the axe and sidearm pistol are the bread and butter for your attacks, there's also a long rifle slot, your fox friend and his abilities that build up a separate stun meter, and a set of reusable grenades that I really never use, so I couldn't tell you if they're even worth using. The long rifle slot gives you a more powerful ranged option. Most rifles only have 3 shots that only refill on rest, but there's some variation depending on which one you choose. You can use it to blast down area bosses to half-life before they even see you, you can assassinate annoying shield users from afar, or as a counter-sniping weapon certainly, though the range parry is an excellent skill to unlock here instead. Outside of the starting equipment, you'll find a decent variety of weaponry if you go searching for it, as well as various armor pieces. There are set bonuses that you can find, and some really powerful special effects in some of them, like gloves that add 2 meters of range on your axe. In Flintlock, you'll use all of the reputation points you gather for either upgrading your weapons and equipment, or for purchasing skills. You don't have to worry about upgrading your individual stats. Hit points are upgraded by finding shrines, there's no stamina bar, and the damage you do is determined by the upgrade level of the weapon. Now, unfortunately, this is the type of game where, once you start upgrading a weapon, you kinda really need to stick with it, as the costs for upgrading later in the game are so high, you can't really switch weapons you're using. Our little fox friend can also be slightly upgraded by finding feathers around the map, or finding his little magic gem things that allow him to apply more curses as he attacks enemies. He also has a customizable ultimate ability that is quite powerful. In Flintlock, there is also a little minigame, Sebo, that many of the NPCs in the world will want to play. It's alright. It's certainly no Gwent, but I wouldn't say it's terrible. Though if it didn't give you reputation for beating the NPCs, I probably wouldn't have played it much. Most games are going to end in a draw. It's very easy to play defense. And if you draw, you lose. So most of the time it's just a matter of finding a pattern that confuses the AI that's playing defense. Exploring the world feels good, and they reward you for doing so, most of the time at least. You have an incredibly detailed map and UI to find everything that you need. The areas outside of the direct path to the next story bosses are well populated with creatures and points of interest. There are hidden areas, NPCs with side quests that may lead to mini-bosses or dungeons. Upgrade points for both you and the fox. Chests with armor and weapons can be found as well, but far less than I would have liked to see. And of course, since this is a Souls-light, there are trinkets all over that you can consume for more reputation. The game is divided into 3 main regions, and after you unlock new ones, you are free to travel back to the previous ones to finish quests or find materials or upgrades you missed. It's not an incredibly long game. It took me about 11 hours, start to finish, and that's with doing almost all of the side quests and making sure I search every nook and cranny to get my weapons to max level. Graphically, this is a pretty good game for Unreal 4. It's not going to blow you away, but the world looks good, it feels lived in, and I got pretty steady 60 frames per second the whole time. While I didn't have stuttering, I did have the game crash a handful of times. 4 times right after a boss, which meant I had to redo the entire fight. I did have an early copy, and I was warned I wouldn't have the day 1 stability patch available to me, so hopefully that's all fixed if you decide to give Flintlock a shot. Other than that, everything was smooth. This is a very modern and approachable game for the genre. It's got easy-to-use maps and UIs, generous tooltips with full explanations on effects, and variable difficulty for people looking for more or less of a challenge. I really enjoyed Flintlock as a fun little Souls-light game. For $35 on Steam, or as a Day 1 inclusion on Game Pass, this is certainly a game worth checking out. It's actually quite impressive at that price point. So with the value in consideration, I'm going to bump up the score to an 8 out of 10. Combat's smooth, it's incredibly accessible, and the story is just good enough. Souls-likes and Souls-lights are in right now, and I'll be adding Flintlock to the pile of worthy additions to the genre, and A44 to the list of smaller developers that I'm very excited to see what they do next. Thanks so much for watching this rapid fire review, and I'll see you next time on the next Angry Joe Show.